My coworkers insisted on working in the dark. They said the lights gave them migraines. I didn't have any strong feelings either way, but I could see their point. The white lights that illuminated our office were brighter than normal, combined with the glare we would get from the sun, and how we each had 3 computer monitors we would have to stare at for hours at a time. It truly was a bit much. And so, when they lowered the blinds and turned off the lights, I didn't think too much about it, though I did laugh at the coincidence. The light my desk was positioned under was an emergency light, one that would always stay on regardless of the light switch. It bathed me in light while the rest of the office dimmed into darkness. But since I was the one in my part of the office that didn't mind, I found no reason to move. At least, not until a few weeks ago. That was when I started to notice that my coworkers were watching me from the dark. Trina was the first one I caught. She sat on the same row of desks just opposite me, so that if we moved our screens, we would be looking right at one another. I adjusted a monitor, and between the gap I made as I moved it, I saw Trina staring straight at me. Our eyes met, and in an instant, she looked away, typing furiously at her own computer. I didn't think anything of it, figuring that she had simply spaced out, as office workers were prone to do after hours of monotonous busy work. But after the 3rd time I caught her staring that day, I actually felt some warmth spread in my cheeks as I involuntarily blushed. My success in the dating market was comparable to squeezing water from a stone, so my weakness to the attention of any woman was excessively high, much less to one as cute as Trina. But when I caught one of my male coworkers, Mark, glancing at me several times from a few desks over, I realized the truth with a bit of embarrassment. The emergency light over my head was like a spotlight in the darkness, turning my desk into a stage and me into a performer. People's eyes were naturally drawn to the brightest part in our office, so Trina's stares were as involuntary as my earlier blush. And that's where my thoughts on the matter could have ended, but being the center of attention was not one of my strong suits. And under the light, I imagined myself as an actor who had never rehearsed or bothered to learn the lines, anxiety bubbling up at the thought of so many people watching me, judging me for my many obvious inadequacies. I felt my back straighten and my hands tremble on the keyboard, trying my best to project confidence while feeling none at all. I soon found my own eyes wandering, peering out into the darkness to see if anyone else was staring at me, hoping against hope that I wasn't making a fool out of myself. They all were. By the end of the following day, I'd caught every one of my coworkers from my section staring at me multiple times. Most would avert their eyes just as I looked at them, as if ashamed of their own gaze. But what concerned me most was that others would not. Glenn, Emma, even my manager Amanda, did not look away when I saw them. If anything, they stared at me with greater intensity, and each time I found myself breaking our eye contact, unable to handle the pressure it crushed me with. I remember going home that night mentally drained and utterly exhausted. But that was only the beginning. The staring continued, consistent and pervasive. I tried not to look around, tried to avoid meeting their gaze, but the feeling of eyes on me were like weights pressing me down into my chair. I would have to convince myself it wasn't a problem, that I was blowing everything out of proportion, that I simply had poor social skills and that I didn't know what to do with all of that attention. Except it got worse. I normally came to work around a half hour earlier than the other employees in my section. It let me beat traffic, gave my old computer time to start up, and I just generally did not like being late anywhere. Most of my coworkers showed up right on time or even a few minutes late. Only then, when I got to the office, walking down the aisles of desks, I realized I wasn't alone. I looked around and almost jumped out of my skin. Amanda was looking at me from the other side of the glass wall of a conference room, the lights in that room completely off. Glenn peered around the corner of the break room, his eyes following me without blinking. Mark had hidden behind one of the pillars that held up the roof and stabilized the office building, and started watching me as I walked around that pillar. Trina was sitting on the floor, in the dark, at the end of my row, waiting for me to get into view. I went to hide in the bathroom for several minutes to deal with my panic attack, and when I left that bathroom, I saw Emma in the hallway, having awaited my return. I didn't know how to handle what was happening. I didn't even understand what was happening. I moved throughout that day in a daze, catching my coworkers watching me down the halls, in the break room, just outside the elevators, and even in the parking garage. The parking garage was the worst that day, because the one staring at me, not blinking once, was our HR director. My thoughts of lodging a complaint vanished. The dark, which had been so unbothersome to me in the past, made my heart race each time I approached it or passed by it. And my hopes sank even further when I tried to turn the lights in the office back on, regardless of permission, only to flip the light switches to no effect. Whether accidentally broken or deliberately sabotaged, the means of turning the lights back on in the office had been disabled. Day after day this continued, with my time out of the office being my only reprieve. My work suffered, and I hated when Amanda would come to my desk to speak with me about it, her eyes unwavering, tears running down her cheeks after several minutes of her failing to blink. I hated how Trina would ask where I was going when I stood up from my desk, her eyes bloodshot, as if me leaving the glow of the emergency light was unbearable to her. I couldn't focus. I couldn't even think. I backed my car up into a concrete post when I forgot to take it out of reverse in the same parking spot I always used. I jumped back when the gas station attendant looked up from the register to meet my eyes. I rewatched the same 10 minutes of a movie nearly a dozen times, but had to keep rewinding it because I kept on standing up to look out of my window into the night, convinced someone was watching my home from the darkness outside. And when my next-door neighbor, whom I had exchanged phone numbers with for emergencies, texted me, telling me he thought he saw some people out in the sidewalk staring at my home and asking if he should call the police, I broke down in tears. I hid myself in the bathroom, the door locked until morning, and called in sick to work that day. The next night, I cracked open the blinds and looked out the window and saw the shadow of a person standing across the street, just outside the range of my house lights, and I'm positive they were staring at me. I don't know how I managed it, but even as sleep-deprived as I was, I got ready for work the following morning, hours before the start of my shift, and drove through the dark, empty streets to my office. I made my way into the building, through the brightly lit lobby, and up the elevator to my floor, the metal doors opening into near total darkness. Using the flashlight on my phone, I made my way down the halls, trying my best to only illuminate where I needed to walk, because when I lifted the light up, I saw them. My coworkers, my bosses, employees from different sections and different departments, all of them watching me with their unblinking, red-rimmed eyes, each of them moving to follow me, to keep me in their line of sight, all of them having waited for my arrival hours before I should have come. My heart thumped in my chest, my palms felt clammy, beads of sweat ran down my neck, but I made my way to my desk, the one still brilliantly lit by the white emergency light. I ignored Trina, who had rolled her chair to just outside the light to watch me, and Glenn, staring at me from under his desk. Instead, I pulled from my bag a large flathead screwdriver, and with only an ounce of hesitation, I stood on my desk and reached up, using the end of the screwdriver to pull open the plastic cover of the light, its brightness nearly blinding me. With the cover removed, I used my hands to grab the long fluorescent tube light and, with a twist, popped it out of position, turning the emergency light off and plunging my immediate surroundings into darkness. For several long moments, all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing. But eventually I heard movement, and my eyes, slowly adjusting to the dark, saw Trina roll her chair back to her desk, saw Glenn get up from the floor, saw the HR director walk back to their office. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sigh of relief escape my lips, and I replaced the plastic cover of the light and got down from my desk before anyone could say anything. Hours later, my shift started, and I logged onto my computer in the dark, just like everyone else, without a single person looking my way. At first, I thought the relief of not being watched constantly was what slowed down my work that morning. However, another employee, a woman I did not know from several rows of desks away, looked up and met my eyes, and I instinctively looked away. She had caught me staring at her, but it was hard not to, with that emergency light over her desk.